Ladies and gentlemen, when the storms of life rise and nations tremble, when the noise of failure grows louder than the whisper of hope, I do not come to mourn with the mourners, I come to awaken the giants. This is not a speech for the faint-hearted. This is a trumpet for those tired of circles, tired of chains, tired of repeating pain. If you are ready to stop describing problems and start designing power, then listen, not with your ears, but with your spirit. For today we rise not to complain, but to conquer. When a people are tested, when a nation is pressed down by hardship, when the weight of failure seems heavier than the will to rise, the difference between life and death, between stagnation and breakthrough, is not in the magnitude of the problem, it is in the clarity of the solution. I stand to tell you today that those who dwell on problems die in the wilderness, but those who fix their eyes on the solution cross the Red Sea. The wilderness is not the issue, the sea is not the barrier. The real prison is the mindset of the one who refuses to see a way forward. Many perish not because the enemy is strong, but because their vision is small. They are buried in what went wrong instead of building what could go right. They cry about Egypt while the path to Canaan lies ahead. Every time you focus on the problem, you empower it. Every time you repeat the statistics of failure, you reinforce the chains. But when you dare to speak possibility in the face of impossibility, you become a weapon in divine hands. The people of Israel were not destroyed by Pharaoh. They were destroyed by their doubt. They looked back when they should have looked ahead. They talked about onions in Egypt instead of dreams in the Promised Land. And the tragedy is not that Pharaoh pursued them. The tragedy is that they longed to go back to him. That is what happens when you focus on the problem. You romanticize your captivity. You justify your stagnation. You excuse your chains. But when you shift your vision to the solution, you begin to see that seas can part, walls can fall, rivers can stop, and deserts can bloom. It is not that the problem does not exist, but the question is, what are you magnifying? Are you magnifying the power of your God or the presence of your Pharaoh? Are you talking about how high the mountain is, or are you speaking to the mountain, commanding it to move? You see, some people build monuments around problems. They name their seasons after pain. They make every conversation a ceremony of failure. But you cannot heal in the same space where you keep rehearsing the hurt. You cannot move forward while your eyes are glued to the rear-view mirror. Those who walk in victory know how to identify the problem, but they do not camp there. They rise up and say, what is the solution? Power belongs not to those who point fingers, but to those who build bridges. The builders of destiny are not men who avoided pain. They are men who processed pain and extracted purpose. They are the ones who, when everyone else said, we are finished, dared to say, we have just begun. They are the ones who do not cry about the darkness. They light candles. They do not curse the system. They create alternatives. They do not gossip about the storm. They design arcs, and when the waters rise, they do not drown. They float on the blueprint of vision. It is easier to talk about the weight of chains than to forge keys. But keys change lives. Chains only maintain pity. If you want sympathy, talk about problems. But if you want transformation, you must start talking about solutions. When a nation is in crisis, the problem is obvious. It takes no genius to describe decay, but it takes vision to redesign systems. It takes courage to step out of comfort. It takes clarity to lead, and the world will never bow to those who explain what is wrong. It bows to those who show what is possible. This is the hour where we must stop feeding the fire of failure with the oxygen of our complaints. We must starve the problem and feed the solution. If the system is broken, build a better one. If the gate is closed, create your own door. If they do not give you a seat at the table, build your own table and make it bigger. Solutions are not for the elite, they are for the committed. They are not born in boardrooms, they are born in broken places where someone dares to think differently. Your destiny is not in the hands of those who oppress you. It is in your hands, in your vision, in your discipline to act when others only react. Complainers remain slaves, but creators become kings. That is not a poetic line. It is the reality of history and the truth of destiny. You can sit and cry, shout and protest, wail and groan, but if all you do is describe the chains, you will die wearing them. Those who change the world do not waste time explaining why they were oppressed. They rise, build, and take dominion. A nation does not rise on the backs of complainers, it rises on the shoulders of visionaries who refuse to bow to limitation, who look beyond the brokenness and ask, what can we make of this rubble? Because kings are not crowned by sympathy, they are crowned by strategy. You see, a slave sees everything as a reason to stop, a reason to give up, a reason to wait for permission. But a creator sees the same mess, the same mountain, the same madness, and starts molding bricks from the clay. While the slave asks, why me? The creator declares, watch me. While the slave repeats the words of failure, the creator writes the script of freedom, and the difference is not access, it is attitude. The same stone that caused one man to stumble becomes the foundation of another man's temple. The same fire that burned one man to ashes forged another into steel. Look around you and you will see a generation addicted to complaint. They flood the streets and flood the screens. They have mastered the art of blaming everyone and everything. The government, the economy, the past, the system, the parents, the teachers, the history books. But hear me, no nation has ever been built on a foundation of excuses. If complaints built kingdoms, we would all be emperors by now. But the truth is uncomfortable. Only creators rule. Those who create systems, create value, create platforms, create answers, they are the ones who rise from nothing and redefine everything. When the world bows, it bows not to the loud, but to the effective. You want to lead? Stop crying about what they did and start building what must be done. You want change? Then stop echoing sorrow and start architecting strategy. God never blessed noise, He blessed movement. He blessed action. He blessed hands that built, not mouths that grumbled. Remember the children of Israel, 40 years wandering, not because the land was far, but because the mindset was wrong. They had been taken out of Egypt, but Egypt had not been taken out of them. Slavery was broken from their bodies, but not from their tongues. They still talked like victims, still thought like prisoners, still complained like captives. And so they died in circles, because complainers die in circles. They start every year hoping, and end every year mourning. They plant nothing, build nothing, own nothing, become nothing, until they are replaced by a generation that says, enough of this noise, let us take the land. The land does not respond to lamentation. It responds to action. You can cry for 400 years, but only one decision can open the Jordan. You can weep for justice, but only boldness and vision will establish it. It is not how long you suffered. It is how you respond now. Do you know why kings are rare? Because creators are rare. Because most people would rather explain why it's hard than do the hard thing. But let it be known, the throne is not for those who shout. It is for those who act. The crown is not for those who explain what was lost. It is for those who multiply what remains. You must choose. Will you be among the mourners of history or the makers of history? Will you be remembered as the man who told stories of slavery or the one who built the house of freedom? The world is watching. The enemy is watching. Heaven is watching. What will you do with the ashes? Will you bury them, or will you use them to fuel your fire? Will you point at Pharaoh forever, or will you walk into your promise with your head high and your hands building? Faith is not the absence of mountains. It is the authority to move them. And let it be said loudly and clearly, we do not ignore the mountain, we confront it. We do not close our eyes and pretend the wall is not there, we speak to it. We command it. We declare our movement in the face of resistance, because faith is not denial. Faith is domination. Faith does not pretend everything is perfect. It knows things are broken, but believes that broken pieces can still build palaces. Real faith does not ignore the wound. It believes in the healing. Real faith does not ignore the fire. It walks through it and comes out without smoke. Faith is the language of warriors, the currency of builders, the engine of visionaries who see what is not yet there and dare to act like it is already done. There are many who call themselves believers, but when pressure comes, they fold. They do not speak to the mountain, they run from it, they do not declare light. They adjust to the darkness, and yet they wonder why their lives do not rise, why their purpose remains dormant. It is because they confuse belief with passivity. But let me say it now, faith without movement is fantasy. Belief without building is betrayal of destiny. If you believe but do not move, if you trust but do not build, you are not walking in faith. You are dreaming with no direction. And God does not respond to fantasy. He responds to faith with fire. He responds to boldness with breakthroughs. We live in a time where many have learned how to sound spiritual but do nothing. They have learned how to quote scripture but build no systems. They shout amen in rooms where no action is birthed. They lift their hands but never lift their communities. They bow their heads but never raise their standards. And so they wait for God to move while heaven waits for them to act. But let it be known, faith does not sit in silence. Faith rises even when the legs are shaking. Faith speaks even when the throat is dry. Faith builds even when the materials are few, because real faith sees what the natural eye cannot and still lays the first brick. You must stop waiting for the sea to part before you walk. Faith is walking into the water when Pharaoh is behind you and waves are in front of you. Faith is not praying for the wall to fall while sitting still. It is walking around it again and again, even when your feet are blistered and your enemies are laughing. Faith is doing what makes no sense because your spirit knows something your mind cannot explain. That is the kind of faith that makes history. That is the kind of faith that changes bloodlines. That is the kind of faith that breaks curses and births nations. And understand this, your mountain responds to your mouth. The mountain hears your voice, and if your voice is filled with doubt, the mountain grows. If your voice is filled with fear, the mountain settles. But if your voice is filled with fire, with truth, with divine audacity, the mountain begins to tremble. Do not whisper to the mountain, command it. Do not negotiate with the wall. Speak to it, because God gave you the power not to discuss barriers, but to destroy them. He gave you the fire not to manage storms, but to silence them. The powerful solve, the powerless blame. This is not a slogan. It is a law of leadership, a principle of power, a truth carved deep into the bones of history. Those who rise are those who respond. Those who fall are those who explain. If you study the great shifts in nations, in families, in destinies, you will find this pattern. When the powerless open their mouths, they explain who broke it. When the powerful speak, they declare how to fix it. There is a world of difference between those who describe the fire and those who carry water. You can choose to stay in the cycle of reaction, or you can become the force of solution, but you cannot do both. The lion does not cry about the jungle. He does not complain about the prey being scarce. He does not organize pity parties in the wilderness. He moves with focus, with strategy, with presence. That is what makes him the king. It is not his roar, it is his response. You see, power is not measured by emotion. It is measured by execution. It is not about who feels the most pain. It is about who transforms pain into plans. And that is what this generation must remember. Tears may be honest, but transformation is not built on honesty alone. It is built on action. Feel what you must, cry if you must, but when the morning comes, get up and build. You cannot rule what you keep blaming. You cannot change what you refuse to own. The powerless always point fingers outward, but the powerful point fingers inward first. Not because they are guilty, but because they are responsible. You cannot fix what you refuse to claim. The future does not belong to those who explain who destroyed the house. It belongs to those who lay the first brick of a new one. When you take responsibility, you take territory. When you shift from complaint to construction, you unlock divine access, because heaven partners not with pity, but with purpose, not with emotion, but with execution. Some of you are stuck because you're waiting for someone else to say sorry, for someone else to give you closure, for someone else to fix what they broke. But let me tell you this truth. If you wait for others to repair your foundation, you will die in delay. Power is not in waiting for the apology. It is in rising regardless of the pain. It is in choosing to lead even when you were the one left bleeding. It is in saying, though they did not help me, I will still build. Though they pushed me down, I will still rise. Though they closed the door, I will still create my own gate. That is what separates the rulers from the reactors. Look at your situation and ask yourself, am I solving or am I blaming? Because you cannot solve and blame at the same time. If your hands are full of excuses, they cannot hold tools. If your mind is filled with complaints, it has no room for blueprints. And the tragedy is that many would rather talk about what is wrong than do what is right. They gather in circles to repeat the failure instead of forming a plan to defeat it. But no great kingdom was ever built by those who loved conversation more than construction. You must shift your energy, shift your speech, shift your sight, stop looking at who failed you and start becoming who your generation needs. The powerful do not wait for ideal conditions. They create results in chaos. They are not driven by comfort. They are driven by calling. They are not waiting for peace. They make peace by moving forward. Even in the fire, they find a strategy. Even in betrayal, they find momentum. They understand that the world is not moved by tears. It is moved by truth carried by action. And if you want to carry power, you must stop waiting for someone to change your life and become the one who changes it. The powerless wait for rescue. The powerful become the rescue. The powerless talk about what is missing. The powerful build with what remains. The powerless say, it's too late. The powerful say, now is the time. You have to decide. Will you spend your days echoing your pain? Or will you use your voice to speak a new reality into existence? Will you repeat the same story of struggle? Or will you become the author of a new chapter? Power is not something you wait for. It is something you become.